building that burn manufactures hash oil, which contains THC, the active ingredient in marijuana. A new outbreak of coronavirus in northeast China has led authorities there to reimpose
Set the meeting. She's got a bug eye. Look at her eyes.
Okay, it is 7:01, so I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. Please rise and pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty. Okay,
We just make sure we can all hear George.
Yes.
yeah. There are 34 participants in this meeting at the moment. And here comes another one. And another one. So there will be 36. I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved with an amendment. Proposed amendment.
Go ahead.
I would like to try to put all of the normal annual budget meeting agenda items together so we can see the broad scope. So I would propose to, after item number 5, move the item of the DEP up, item number 8, and then move item number 7, revised emergency plan for register of voters, up, and then run 6 and 9.
Okay, I'll second that. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. We have 37 participants. Public comment. I will unmute everyone and there are now going to be 39 participants. All for the purpose of public comment.
Or I'd like to make
Who
a
are
comment.
not speaking, can you please mute yourselves? Phil.
Thank you, Laura. Board of Selectmen, I wanted to ask 2 questions this evening. Both are related to open air meetings proposed for this week. So before I get to the questions real quickly, I'd like to just highlight aspects of 7 of Governor Lamont's 40+ COVID related executive orders that I believe at face value some may think pertain. On March 12th, Executive Order 7 limited gatherings to 250 people, and at that time set until April 30th. On March 14th, he issued Executive Order 7B, which suspended the in-person open meeting requirement of government. It suspended the requirement. It did not cancel any meetings. On March 16th, he issued Executive Order 7D, which dropped the 250 headcount from the original executive order down to 50. It still kept the April 30th date. On March 18th, he issued Executive Order 7F, and that closed all places of public amusement, but it very specifically carved out, quote, public parks and open recreation areas, end quote. On March 26th, he issued Executive Order 7N, which restricts social and recreational gatherings to 5 people. Again, there's a very specific carve out. It carves out, quote, government operations or other activities that are not social nor recreational, end quote. On April 10th, Executive Order 7X extended Executive Order 7F's Section 2, which was the public amusement one, to this Wednesday, May 20th. It did not change the carve out for public parks and open recreation areas. It also extended Executive Order 7N, Section 1, the one I had just previously read on March 26th. Again, it did not change the carve out for government operations or other activities that are not social nor recreational. On April 17th, Executive Order 7BB, that talks about wearing face coverings or better if you cannot maintain a safe distance of 6 feet would pertain. There are a couple others that matter to the later items in your agenda. Obviously, 7I and 7HH, they're quite specific about financial and budgetary matters. They don't apply broadly to all meetings. So with that, as way of quick background, my two questions are, one, any sense of when the permit I applied for on Friday for a non-social, non-recreational event this Thursday, May 21st at Allenbrook Park might be approved? And the second one is, on what basis would we not be allowed to hold a similar non-social, non-recreational event again on Thursday at White's Farm? Namely, the chairman of the Conservation Commission proposed a special meeting at that time. Thank you very much.
I directed the recreation director to approve your permit for Thursday night because I did not want to get in the way of the nomination process that you had already put into into play. And I understand the implications of that. As far as board and commission meetings are concerned, we made it a policy early on that we would do remote meetings. And I'm standing by that policy regardless of the executive order. This is why. Outdoor meetings aren't the answer. How are you going to account for weather that can come up at the last minute? Who's going to set up the meeting with chairs and tables and appropriate microphones so that people, how are you going to accommodate the public? You know, I am looking forward to having indoor meetings again because as good as this has allowed us to continue town business, please mute your phones if you are not speaking. This is certainly not an ideal way. None of this is ideal. But for as many of you who have wanted to resume meeting, there's been many of you who don't want to meet in person. There have been board and commission members who have already told me that they want me to make sure that we find a platform like this that we can continue to use until they become more comfortable coming into. And quite honestly, right now we have 43 participants in this meeting. I'm thinking that even the public is going to want to resume this way of participating in their local government if they choose. So we are looking at how, when we get back to our in-person meetings, how we might accommodate some form of technology so that in real time, they can watch their government at work. I feel very strongly about the public's participation, even though, yes, I agree, some boards rarely get public participation. But I want you to remember that all of our meetings are open and people should definitely have access to those meetings. So that's my opinion. And later on, the board, we can discuss making a change in that policy. But that's the policy. I also feel.
So when you say the policy, if I may real quickly, because I reviewed the Board of Selectman minutes as well, in addition to the 40 some odd executive orders, and I didn't see where that policy was enacted. So can you just tell me when?
So early on, when we created the page, And we talked about, the public having limited access, the public having, by appointment before we sent everybody home to work remotely. We put it right there in that page that board and commission meetings were going to be held that way. And until now, no one has objected, right? When we were having bad weather, nobody has objected. And I know that George has asked us to see if we can get creative. But I think outdoor meetings is not the answer. Can we get creative in other ways? Yes, we can. And we are already on a staff level trying to figure those things out. But even with the social distancing, when we do get to the town hall, I can push the chairs away from each other. But what happens when the last chair gets filled? Do we have to cancel the meeting because it's limited? Because I've filled capacity? There are all these little details that we're gonna have to
Just stand in the back.
work out together.
Yes. If I may, real quickly for the record, on April 22nd at the P&Z meeting, I spoke in favor of continuing to have technology like this available because I think it's an excellent supplement to in-person meetings, but I just don't want it to be the only way going forward. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So I'll just say, I think that's a great way of being innovative, thinking outside the box, and certainly agree that supplemental, doing it both ways is a great idea moving forward.
Any other public comment? Joe Pasquale, your hand's up.
Good evening, everyone. Hope everybody's families and everybody are doing well. I got a couple comments, Laura. Several weeks ago at one of your Board of Selectmen meetings, you had mentioned different projects that you were having the town employees work on while we're in this condition. And I just wanted to recommend maybe our town website for updates.
One of them.
Because it still shows Peggy as being our tax assessor, Tom Hennick as being one of our selectmen. There's many old committees that are still listed, and it seems like it was just kind of funny that somebody got nominated to the Ethics Commission a couple weeks ago, and they're already updated, and we've got Tom Hennick still as being one of our selectmen. The other comment is Higginham Road, the project that was done there. All the silt fencing is still up. Is it the contractor's responsibility to come back and remove all of that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I just contacted our town engineer today asking for a schedule on all of our projects that are completed with construction, but still we have some punch list items on all of them, and that's Higginham Road, Co Road, Indian Lane, and Creekmont Road. And he's going to be getting the schedule. I know that they were doing some work on Higginham Road today, but I want to know when all the punch lists will be complete. So I'm expecting a report back.
And they were working on Indian Lane today too also. The last comment, I guess, is the transfer. Are you going to discuss the transfer of the properties tonight?
Yes, under old business.
And so I guess I'd like to ask now both you and John, if you could explain your rationale in voting for the Turkey Hill properties to be sold for $1,000. Now, I understand it puts them back on the tax rolls, but what I don't understand is the decision-making process, I guess, that you guys used, because you were the two that voted in favor of it, of selling assets that were assessed at $200,000 a piece and selling them for $1,004. I understand the fact about putting them back on the tax rolls, but you had an option of a couple: one, not selling them and waiting; two, not selling them and going to a realtor to try to get more money, which doesn't seem to me that would be that difficult on assets that are worth $200,000. So I hoping that maybe you could explain your rationale in voting approval for those two sales.
Sure. So I want to remind you that 5 different selectmen voted to not engage a realtor, to not put a minimum bid on any of the properties. For the Turkey Hill property, the research that I did on there, and it started way back to where the foreclosure action started. And it goes back to the original developer. Those lots, even in the original subdivision approval, were always the harder lots to sell and to develop. When it did go to tax sale, there were no bidders. And the committee that was chosen to handle that tax sale thought it was for 2 reasons. One, because the town was trying to recoup its costs associated with that foreclosure, and therefore put a too high a price on it because of the difficulty in developing. So my thought was, in voting yes, that the low price may be one of the only ways that we can get it developed, because one of the other bidders was even lower. And I suspect, but I'm not sure, that they just wanted it for excess acreage rather than to be developed as a residential property.
Joe, and I'll just speak on it as well. You asked, and again, I don't know your background in real estate or land development, but those pieces of property both need an exorbitant amount of site work in order to be built on. So if you look at those, and I think when they were for sale with the realtor, they were in the range of the $40,000 or $50,000 range. No one took it. So at that rate. Now, if you know you need $100,000 and you know they've got easement issues, and one of them might not even be able to be built on without permission. They've got easement issues where they can be built, where the site work can go with the driveway, and you're going to have to spend in excess of $100,000 to turn it into, to put a house up there. And you can go off and buy a building lot for 70, 80, 90,000. A beautiful building lot just sold for 110,000. It doesn't make much financial sense to go spend $30, $40, $50,000. So when you get this, oh, the town assessor says it's worth $140,000. That's not true. You can have a baseball card that in a book says it's worth $25, but if no one's going to give you $25, that is not what it's worth. Maybe worth $1, maybe worth $2. In this situation, you're still paying $5,500 a year in taxes to hold on to one of these pieces of land that you're then going to have to spend in excess of, $100,000 to turn it into before you can build on it. So I don't think there was a lot of desire for people to have that property and have this $5,500 a year tax bill until you decide to do something with it. So I think there's a lot more to it with the Turkey Hill lots. I mean, the point was get them back on the tax rolls, hope we get them developed. And then not only would it bring in taxable revenue for the land, but also hopefully eventually a house there as well. So I think you're kind of, you're off the mark when you talk about there being worth $150,000, $200,000. I don't know where you come up with that because it's on the assessor and that's what it says. That's not an accurate number. None of those numbers that an assessor puts there are necessarily accurate. Certainly, I mean, that's why we have a Board of Assessment Appeals. That's why, again, they were on the market for, I think, in the 40 to 50 range, and they got no bids or no offers. So, I just think you got to look at the whole picture on those Turkey Hill lots, and I think it was a good idea. I don't think the town should be in the business of owning real estate when we can get taxable revenue coming in. Now, obviously, we have to have town buildings, we have to have schools, things like that. But when we have this excess land, put it back out there, let it generate revenue, taxable revenue for the town, and put it out there in an open bid process, which was done in this situation for these 7 properties.
Okay, so I guess with John's comments, it just leads me to more concern. We're having our properties reevaluated this summer, and one of our selectmen in the town says that their opinions seem to be invalid. I guess it causes me a little bit of concern if we're continuing to use the same firm to value things, and in turn, our taxes are based upon their valuation and assessment of properties.
It is a 10-year-old valuation, Joe.
And Joe, what a building lot ready to go. I think it's $160,000 what the town says a 2-acre building lot ready to go. That's what it's worth. But every lot
Correct.
is then different. But then every lot's different. This one might need $150,000, $100,000 worth of work to get it to that level. So yes, it is a perfect buildable, let's get ready to go. Yes, but again, like I just mentioned, those 2 Turkey Hill lots, I don't even think one of them you could build on without an easement from possibly from one of the neighbors. I mean, go up there and look at them.
All right, John, excuse me. I do have to ask everyone to please mute their microphones. Those of you who have not it's causing some background noise. Thank you. Anything else, Joe? Okay. I see Lindsay, you have your hand raised.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I live at 62 Castle Lane in Durham. I'm also a mom of 2 enrolled in RSD 13. I'm really concerned to see line item 9 on tonight's agenda. I've always been a firm believer in transparency and including all of residents and decisions up for vote in the town. But putting 3 Board of Education seats up for nomination on June 29th, for nomination on June 29th, and then a vote on the 30th. All this is going to do is result in uneven representation of our residents, of our voting residents. First, we currently have a large population of seniors and compromised families who are not even willing to leave the home unless it's a medical emergency. They've relied on delivery, family, friends for essentials. So asking these people to come, even in the car, curbside to vote for 3 Board of Education seats for a 1-year term is a disservice to our senior community. Many of this population doesn't have the knowledge, devices, or platform to engage in Zoom or the nomination. So many of them wouldn't even be able to put up a nomination. We also have a lot of senior residents who haven't even been able to fly home from their winter homes in Florida or the South or wherever they are. Second, you're scheduling a town meeting and a vote for this the weekend before 4th of July. So while families aren't going on rental vacations, beaches are closed or all these things, or we don't even know where it will be on that weekend, but you have families that own properties in other states that have private beaches, private little ponds that they go to, and they're not going to be there 4th of July weekend. The 3-hour window that you want to do for a voting will likely eliminate a lot of first responders. It'll eliminate a lot of essential workers who are working overnights and warehouse jobs to keep stock available. It's just not an even representation in a very, very, to me, important vote with 3 people to vote on my child's education.
Lindsay, could I don't necessarily disagree. I would have liked to have this done where people could mail in absentee ballots. When we obviously changed over how we're going to go in the forward and be able to have Board of Ed elections, because I can't tell you how many times seniors, were upset that 8 o'clock at night they can't vote. How many times first responders, how many times people going to school at night would miss that Monday night meeting. So, I think first choice for me would have been where people could get a ballot to their house I supported that, and then, do an absentee ballot application. That's obviously going to happen, but what in this situation would you, we can't do that for this election. So what would you, other than this, what would you recommend being done different than doing it this way? I mean, do
I
you
don't
have
know what,
another
I don't
option?
even, I don't even know at this point what options are available, but I do know that from what most of us thought, were that these seats weren't going to be up for nomination until next year with the change in the referendum. So to see on the agenda that there's a 1-year term for 3 Board of Ed seats, most people don't know this.
I mean, are you saying you would support keeping individuals who weren't elected past June 30th, just let them stay longer? Is that?
I don't know what
I mean,
the
'cause-
answer is, but I know the answer is that we're not going to get the whole point to have these Board of Ed seats changed, in my opinion, from what people said, was so that we moved it to the polls so more people could vote. That town meeting wasn't enough people. So you're saying that we're going to vote on 3 members, even if it's for a year, you're going to get a lower turnout than the town meeting. And it's an uneven turnout. It's low
I don't
and it's
disagree, and it's not, this isn't ideal, but, and I did support actually doing it that way for this election, but for even immediately. But again, that didn't go through. So now we're left with doing it this way, or I guess extending terms, which I certainly could never support because no one put those people, they never got elected past June 30th of the year they were elected for. So I agree, it's not, neither situation is really good. I don't know if there's another situation out there, or, way to do it. But I agree it's not perfect, and I don't think anybody would think it's perfect, but I certainly think it's better than allowing someone who wasn't elected to unduly serve past the time they were elected to serve.
I think it's important to see what other towns have done or what they plan on doing in this situation. We can't be the only ones. So maybe really kind of digging into that and figuring it out, because I just don't think that I think this is the bottom of the barrel decision vote-wise. I think it's low turnout, and I think it's uneven. So I don't know the answer, but I know that this is not the right answer.
I mean, I guess we just need other recommendations, and I don't know what other ones there are. At least this doesn't allow someone to serve who wasn't elected. It allows some way to do it, but
it would be allowing 3 people to serve on the board that necessarily wouldn't have been voted on if we had an even voter turnout.
But at least there is a voter turnout. I guess just extending terms, you're letting someone serve who was never, we're just randomly picking somebody who was only elected till June 30th to say, hey, you can have an extra couple months. So I don't think I could support, I know I couldn't support that because that's not democratic. So I agree, none of these options
Neither is uneven.
great. Well, if I had to choose between those two, I would at least one has an election. Now, it's not under ideal circumstances. The other is just randomly putting somebody forward.
We're going to be hearing from the registrars of voters when we get to that line item. And we will go through the process and their thought process on how they chose this method. So I hope you could stay with us, Lindsay.
Yeah, I'll be here. Thank you.
Rick, I see a Rick whose hand is raised. Is there a Rick who has a question? Any other public comment?
I'd like to make a comment.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is Christina Talbert-Slagle here. I'll turn on my video. Hi. So actually I have a question and then I'd like to make a comment. My question is that I understand there's been quite a bit of discussion about the Board of Ed election possibilities. And I also understand that some attorneys have been consulted. Could someone just share what options the attorneys put forward, please?
Karen, if you want to speak to this, basically the executive order put it in the hands of those who are responsible for conducting elections. And I know that they considered the challenges of absentee ballot voting, and I'm not sure, Karen, are you on the line still? Of if that was a possibility. Karen Cheney, are you on the line?
Christina, when you're talking about the attorney's suggestions, are you talking about extending terms, or are you talking about the executive orders?
Well, I just trying to, I'm not an attorney, and so I don't want to overstep, but I understood that some attorneys were consulted. So not the executive order from the governor, but what were some of the options put forward by the attorneys who were consulted?
Oh, you're talking about for the transition?
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, we dealt with that several meetings ago. And what we voted on was to elect at a town meeting for a shortened term to get us to the next local election, which would be 2021.
And some of the options were to allow a vacancy to occur. We could, the term expires on June 30, 2020. So one of the options was not to fill the position and have 3 vacant chairs. One was to extend terms, which gets a little hairy. I think we had the authority to do it for 30 days, and I'm not sure what that's going to buy us. And the other was to hold some kind of an interim special election to run us till the next municipal election. So I think there were really, if I remember, there were 3 possibilities put forward. So we were trying to do the most democratic process, as the Board of Selectmen really didn't feel they were in a position to extend terms beyond that, which the public, when they voted for these members, saw the expiration date of being June 30, 2020, to turn around and have 3 people turn around and say, let's extend that for however long. And I wasn't even sure how long we could extend it. Again, it sounds like maybe for 30 days, but I'm not sure we can do it for a year and a half.
Okay. So just for clarification, because I thought that Lindsay's questions were really important. On the term extension option, you're saying that the option that was given was an extension for 30 days?
We could do an extension, or we could hold a special election, but in order to do that, we would have to vacate the position for at least 30 days, and with the possible existence of caucuses and all of that, the attorney advised us that vacated seat might go up to 3 to 5 months. So we would go with a vacated seat and then run it at a municipal election. So the best of all cases we felt was to put somebody in office as soon as possible, considering that there's a lot going on with the Board of Ed insofar as looking at a new superintendent and all the things that are existing in play. So
I think he thought there could also be a legal challenge, right, George?
Yeah, it sounded like there was more issues involved in that. And again, the timetable wasn't really good with that one because of the idea that they'd have to go and caucus and have Republican, Democrat, unaffiliated caucuses as well. So that would be a special town election that we could go to the poll. And the other one was the extension of term that the Board of Selectmen would appoint. But again, that to me didn't sound very democratic to me. And I think there was a term limitation on that when we get right back to where we are. So we chose to go with this route that has an interim election at town meeting. And now the issue is, you know, with COVID-19, can we have a town meeting, or how are we going to do that?
Okay, thank you for that information. One comment that I wanted to make was actually just to speak on the situation with the Board of Finance and the budget vote. And I wanted to actually just acknowledge the tough situation that everyone is in here and recognize all of you, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, and thank you for your hard work, because I know that this is just utterly unprecedented in every imaginable way. So this is a tough moment to have to make some tough decisions. Would like to just offer support for the proposed agenda item number 6, authorizing the Board of Finance to adopt the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And I wanted to just point out that, we are really adapting well as a town, and this is one example of coming up with a solution that's really tough in a tough situation, following the executive order and allowing this budget vote to go forward in the way that's proposed on the agenda. We haven't and there's no precedent, and I just wanted to offer support for all of you and offer support for the proposed agenda item, and also just say, I don't know if people are aware, but in my day job I work in global health, and I have a PhD in virology and infectious diseases, and have worked on pandemic response and preparedness. And just want to emphasize how incredibly important it is that we protect our citizens, and we do whatever we have to do, especially with some of our citizens being older and people having existing conditions that could put them at greater risk. This infection, it's sneaky and it's dire, and we have to do whatever we have to do to protect people. So I really want to echo that this is a tough moment, tough decision making, and want to emphasize how important it is that we do what we have to do in this crazy moment and enable us to minimize gatherings, to think very carefully about how we can fully engage the public without asking people to try to get near each other. And, it will get better. It will get better faster if we do the things that we're directed, even if it's hard, and follow the public health experts' advice. So I really appreciate the hard thinking that's gone into this, and just wanted to offer support for that proposed agenda item. I also would echo Lindsay's concerns about bringing people out and asking them to get near each other, even with all the precautions that are in place. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Christine.
Okay. So I just wanted to read from the attorney's opinion, especially since after the last person's comment. It says, however, the simplest method to provide for the transition of terms, and the one that is closest to what the voters intended when they revised the charter in 2006, would be to mimic the language in the charter and apply it to the current members' terms. It's also noted that there are 3 options, and those options are to extend existing terms, to have elections to fill short terms at the town meetings for the next 3 years, or to have special elections to fill short terms for each of the next 3 years. Obviously, the first scenario closely follows the provision of the charter, which was recently, changed. So my only concern is really, obviously, the Board of Selectmen, whichever way of those 3 options you see fit, is completely fine. And if you want to have a special election during a worldwide pandemic and, put our residents at risk, that is certainly on you. But I'm more concerned about, I think our goal as a community with the charter was to have a more fair and equitable process, which I fully support. And I think bringing it to the polls is a great idea to really have more people show up. But now we're basically doing the complete opposite of that, given everything that's going on. And so I think to really limit us to 3 hours to have people come out that are already terrified to come out of their homes, as Lindsay mentioned, I mean, just multitude of issues between people who work second shift, whatever their issue might be. So I would rather see this either be a full day election, how it would have been intended to be, or see if there's something else. And certainly, I don't have the answer to that, and I don't think it's fair to be asking residents, well, what do you think? I think that's why we have all elected the three of you, is to tell us what's the best way to do this. Thank you.
So we're going to hear more from our registrar of voters. The idea of this executive order was to allow the town, and there are not many of us, but allow the towns who elect town officers at town meetings to actually have a town meeting in order to do it. So we were actually happy to finally get direction, because we knew we couldn't have a town meeting. And this executive order has given us the ability. So when we get to item number 9, our 2 registrars of voters are on the line, and they're going to be ready to discuss how they have come up with a plan to actually run this election. It is an election, but remember, it's an election at a town meeting. Any other public comments?
Yeah, Rick here, Laura.
Okay, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was pressing the pound button before when you were calling on me. I found it very interesting to hear all these comments about the election of the Board of Education members, because I've been to, I don't know how many of those annual meetings where we elected Board of Ed members, and the attendance was very low. And as far as that 3-hour window of opportunity, that's at least defined, and it's a greater window than we would have to tell people to go to the town meeting, because even if it was the first item on the agenda, you might not get till 9 o'clock, and it might be all over at 20 after 8. It's not predictable. So what you did is probably the best of.
Well,
what
I should add, Rick, that the registrars, and they will say it when they get to speak, is that, you know, nobody's going to be cut off at 8 o'clock. If there's a line and it takes 2 hours to get everybody through, they're not going to turn people away. But that's all up to us. I mean, tonight we can decide that we want to extend those up.
Laura, I didn't anticipate being shut off at 8 o'clock when the polls closed if you're in line. That's assumed. It's just if we did it the normal way we had been in the past, you don't know when the vote is actually going to take place. So if you only have a limited time where you can get there, you know, you might get there and it's all over, or you might get there and have to leave because you have to go on to something else. So the 3-hour window is a lot better than we have ever had over in the years past. So be commended.
Well, like I said, we might decide we want to start it earlier than 5. So we'll take a shot at that when we get to item number 9. Any other?
Yes. I stated previously I was opposed to the budget going forward, especially to the Board of Finance without action by the townspeople. I don't think it's reflective of the times we're in. It's not that, and I've got some great service out of the people at the town hall and the library over the years, but you know, I understand why the town hall has to be closed to the public. I don't have a problem with that. It's for everybody's better welfare, but at the same token, we don't have access to records and information that we normally would. And it's particularly interesting because I used to tell people that didn't have computers that they could still access the information on the web and go to the library and use the computers there. And obviously the library personnel would assist them in accessing anything they needed to on the computers. And they do have evening hours, but we don't have that either.
Rick, I specifically asked our town clerk today at our staff meeting, has everyone been accommodated who has been looking for any town records, and her answer was yes. She has actually helped people walk through it. So
Well, I'm sure.
to my
Well, I
knowledge,
know.
no one has,
Okay.
been denied service.
Well, I didn't say they were. I just said I didn't think there would be access. Well, like, I know a couple of years ago, I happened to casually mention to the town clerks about the voter list being on the website, and I don't think it is. And I don't know how big a task it is, but that's something that should be there. And, you know, that's something you might spend hours going over. So, you know, this town clerk doesn't have time to spend hours and hours with, you know, each individual that calls up looking for information. The town clerk's office has always been very accessible, extremely accommodating. They bend over backwards to accommodate everyone's needs. It's been there. And, you know, and then as far as the real estate sales go, I'm not going to reiterate anything Joe said, but, you know, obviously we were probably owed money on those things for taxes, and it was legal fees to set up the disbursement, et cetera. And I'm a homeowner, been here a long time, but I'm still probably in a liability column as for what I got out of this community versus what I put in for taxes. So if they build 2 homes on those lots and they put children in the school, it might not be you know, such a great deal financially for the town. I have nothing against people building houses, and I'm all for it, and I'm all for the land, but the market wasn't good, and I think it would have been in our best interest to sit on those things for a while until things, you know, got better, because there's not a lot of developable land in town. But anyway, I'll mute myself again. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Francis, I see your hand up.
Yeah, having served on the Board of Ed, I guess I just ask that you consider whether this is truly essential activity. In this time of pandemic, we're just getting our government back up and going. Our first responders still have to take precautions when we're doing COVID calls. And I honestly, really, you need to ask yourself whether this is absolutely essential to tie up all of the resources that would be required to pull this off safely. Is it really needed at this time? And we could do it at a time when we know it's safer to do it properly, as opposed to trying to do it in the middle of when we're trying to get our government back moving and our services back going. We haven't even done that to 100% yet. So I would just ask that you consider postponing any of it until we get ourselves squared away.
Thank you, Francis. Any other public comment? Okay, thank you all. Item number 5, let me just give you a COVID update.
You skipped 4, Laura.
Oh, that's right. Nominations. We have 2 vacancies, Ag Commission and Inland Wetlands. Do you have any nominations?
I do not.
John? John?
Trying not to unmute. No, I do not.
Okay. Item number 5, our COVID update. We are holding steady with 28 cases and 2 deaths. Our health department continues to do contact tracing until cases are closed out. We have a new page on our website dedicated to the reopening, and that's the page where we have posted information on the guidelines for businesses as they open up, any permits that need to be filed. For example, we had our first application from a food establishment looking to create some outdoor dining spaces. Town hall and library staff are working diligently on our reopening plan. First, to protect employees, and then second, to provide safety to the public. We're hoping to put out some information on that by the end of the week. You might have seen on the news that the governor has pushed back the reopening date for hair salons. It didn't make me happy because I was looking forward to getting that gray out. And it didn't make some of our salon owners happy in town because they worked really hard to get prepared and get ready for Wednesday. But I got to tell you how I believe this happened. Right after they announced the guidelines and the list of companies that would be reopening, we all, CEOs of all the towns, started to get emails from salon workers and salon owners asking us to urge the governor to remove the salons from phase 1. So that's, and I think the governor must have, succumbed to that pressure. So it's just another illustration of 50% will be happy with a decision, 50% won't. And we just have to try to find the right balance. So right now, the last date that we heard was June 1st for hair salons. But our businesses, our food establishments are preparing, and we're trying to help them out as much as we can. And I got to tell you that I am very proud of our town hall staff and how they have stepped up to the plate. You know, some of these decisions have had to be made on the fly, and certainly our technology issues. I know that some of you, look at our budget for technology and might want to choke at it, but we are not overly resourced with technology and resources, and a lot of, some of the changes that we've had to make on the fly have been really yeoman's work. So I want to thank town hall staff, especially Alicia Fonash-Willett, and our assistants from RSD 13 with Ken in helping us get through some of this stuff. And the budget decisions for next year are going to be a little different in light of this. So we're already preparing that. So that's all I have for the COVID-19 update. If there's any questions from the board.
No.
All right, then let's get to the revised emergency plan from the registrars of voters. I know we have Lou Battipaglia on the line and Karen Cheney.
The Secretary of State required all the registrars to amend their emergency plans to include a pandemic or health issue. Our language is very broad because we don't want to have to come in front of the Board of Selectmen every time we make a change. But this is the basic term that what we're proposing for approval by the Board of Selectmen.
George, John, any questions?
Yeah, we're talking about the Registrar of Voters revised emergency plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Revised means that there was a base somewhere. There was an original plan.
Yes, it was approved back, I want to say 2013, shortly after Sandy.
How is this different from that?
It's specifically addressed to health crisis. What it reads is, if the governor or first selectman issues executive orders, or the town health director or the registrars of voters consider that the health of election workers or voters would be compromised by in-person voting, the registrars, after consultation with the Secretary of State, town clerk, health director, and the first selectman, will adapt voting procedures to minimize or negate any public health risk from the act of voting. And so our other emergency plans have to do with everything from tornadoes to fires to if you don't have enough ballots and all the standard emergencies that one has. And this was explicitly for a health crisis.
Okay. I guess what I'm seeing, and I didn't understand, and I spent some time trying to find it. But you say if the governor or first selectman issue executive orders, is the first selectman in Durham authorized to issue executive orders?
I don't know what it's called with the first selectman. Can she issue, like, do I say the Board of Selectmen? I'm not quite sure.
So Karen, so a first selectman under a state of emergency
Yes.
does have some powers that are given him or her by statute. There
Right.
are some towns that by charter gives the mayor or first selectman the ability to issue executive orders. I know that the mayor of Hartford has that ability.
Right.
We do not have any such provision in our charter.
So do you have power under the, if there were a crisis, a health crisis that was a local and not a government one that we had to respond to, how would you let us know that we had to, I know there's cholera in the water discovered the day of the election. What order do you issue that I have to then consult with?
That
I
would
mean, right
probably
now, if it's a health issue, the town's health director would probably issue
be the health director.
the warning.
I have, or the town's health director or the registrar of voters consider
Right.
the election workers or voters.
I'm looking at your wording, and there's just, I know it's maybe nitpicking, but
No, this is important, yeah.
well, the first selectman is in fact the chief executive officer of the town of Durham, but according to town charter and any statute, we don't spell out that the first select person can issue executive orders under section 4.3.1, the affairs of the town. The Board of Selectmen shall be responsible for supervising the affairs of the town. So I think if you want to be correct, you might revise that.
Okay. How?
And the other thing that, and you skipped over when you read it, and I don't know if you took it out, but you're also saying with consultation with the town attorney, comma, if necessary.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that is.
Anytime I see that, to me, it either is or isn't. And a consultation, that's something that we, as a Board of Selectmen or First Selectman, would probably require anyway. But if you put it in a statement like that, you either want to have it or not have it. If necessary, that's according to someone's opinion.
This is an emergency. And the classic example, I used to teach classes on emergency procedures for registrars at our state conferences. So I've spent a lot of time on emergencies. And the classic example I use is if the Republican and I have ballots in the car and we're on our way to deliver them to Corn, and we get in a crash and we're being, helicoptered out, airlifted out, and the ballots are blowing in the wind. That's the kind of emergency. I don't have time to call an attorney and say, oh, let's have a consultation. If I can, if necessary, I will contact them. I will have to call the Board of Selectmen because everything has to go through the first selectman. I can't call Rich directly, but, and if there's time, we'll consult with them. But if this is a true health emergency, I need to be able to respond instantly.
All right, so that would be your request to contact the town attorney if needed.
No, I would go through the first selectman.
Okay.
I don't think that individuals should contact directly, or our legal bills will go through the roof.
So, George, you want to change the words first selectman to Board of Selectmen?
I think it would mirror our charter better.
Okay, I can do that. So you want it to read, if the governor or Board of Selectmen.
Not that I'm even sure we can issue executive orders. So
Yeah,
I almost think it's a moot.
I don't think we do.
So I think it's a moot point. I think it's just the governor's is issuing executive orders, and
Okay.
we don't want to.
Okay, that's fine. It will then read if the.
Not to this, I surely don't want to.
We're not going to force you
40
to.
executive orders.
This is Lou. We're not going to force you to. It says consultation.
I think that we need a reason to trigger it. I think we should not just blithely go off and,
Well, then I think you just take out the or and just put if the governor.
Right. And the second half of it where you say with the Secretary of State, Town Clerk, Health Director, and Board of
Right.
Selectmen in consultation of Town Attorney, I think maybe we belong down below the line, but
yeah,
no, we're not His Majesty.
okay. So then if what triggers it will be the governor's order, town health director, or our own personal observation, and that will trigger adapting our voting procedures. Is that my understanding?
I think so.
Okay, great. I've changed it then. Do you have, so the secretary can write it up and have it approved, and we will send it to the Secretary of State. Okay.
Okay, so I will make a motion to approve the plan as amended.
I'd second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, the next item, which is the former number 8. The consent order that I sent you, I need you to take a good look at and formulate any questions that you have for a future meeting where I'm going to ask you for the approval to sign it. What this order is it's from DEEP, and it is acknowledgement that we have some properties in town that have been affected with contamination to drinking water supply. You can see that this draft is a few years old already. The reason we have not pushed to sign it is because once we do, we have an obligation to act. And so this is an order that we will want to have signed if and when we move forward with extending the water line from Middletown to some of those affected areas. It's also necessary for us to sign in order to be eligible for Section 471 drinking water grants. So in light of our application to the revolving loan fund, I wanted to make sure that you guys had some time to look this over, consider it. It is a consent order that was written by the state of Connecticut, but prior to signing it, we have the ability to negotiate some of the elements of this order.
So are you saying that if we extend the water line further than the EPA has intended, that we fall into a consent order with the state of Connecticut, DEP?
They can file this without our signature, okay? They can impose this without our signature. The better way to do it is for us to both agree to the terms, right?
Right.
And so at the moment, the water line extension per agreement with the city of Middletown can only go to those areas contemplated. And those areas that have been contemplated are in the application that I forwarded you with all those areas. So but this consent order also covers the contamination that happened on Tuttle Road. The water line extension did not contemplate and does not include extension down to Tuttle Road.
Right, but this is a short-term solution to provide potable water for Tuttle Road long-term solution to,
Correct. So why we included Tuttle Road there so that we would be eligible to get some 471 funds for a solution there. Those properties already have filtration systems that were installed by DEP, but I was told that once we sign this consent order, we would probably be able to get some maintenance funds for a short period of time to service those systems.
I guess my question would be more to the former banker in me. Is this, since it's been around for a couple of years, and I'm just hearing that it's been around for a couple of years, is this a contingent liability to the town of Durham? I mean, there's definitely cost here.
We have a liability, no matter how you cut it.
But is it something that we've been stated in our financial reports?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, I mean, this could be potentially a very large liability.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So,
the engineering report or study that we approved at the last meeting, will it touch, will the cost issue be contemplated or discussed in that report?
oh yeah, there's cost, there's an estimated cost. Oh, in the application?
No, I'm saying when they do the engineering study for the next phase, at some point in time, would we get a estimated cost for A, B, C, D, extension to this order?
Yes, so the application does have a probable cost in there, but the study that will precede construction will nail that down to a more accurate number.
Okay. Again, I'm just from a liability perspective, I know that what the EPA did, I mean, we're talking in the neighborhood of $22 million. I mean, to extend a reach to 5 different areas.
It's about $11 million. Well, the last count, yeah, it's substantial. And a lot of decisions are going to have to be made prior to that being brought forward. And one of the first steps that we're taking is by sending out those letters. A sample of it is inside that application to actually gauge interest of people wanting to connect. For instance, Royal Oak. That was an area that was contemplated because there are some quality issues in the water supply up there. But it might turn out that when we survey that neighborhood, that neighbors might say, I'm good. I'll keep my filtration system instead of taking the benefit assessment and paying the connection fee to public water. Or we say as a town, and we're going to bring the water to you and everybody's going to get an assessment. And by ordinance, we would have to do this and everybody would have to sign on. So there's a lot more steps involved with bringing this forward, that's for sure.
But we would know all of that before we sign this consent order.
That's my hope.
Okay.
But I wanted to give you plenty of time to take a look at it, all right? All right, let's get down to the former item number 6. And this is our action item as prescribed and required by Executive Order 7I, and then later supplemented with Executive Order 7HH. And I did send you an opinion letter, or an opinion email, I should say, from our attorney, which reiterates what I just said, that even though or Executive Order 7HH.1 reiterates that it's a mandatory directive, it did not remove the requirement from the Board of Selectmen actually stating a motion to direct the budget making authority, which in the town of Durham is the Board of Finance, to adopt the budget and set the mill rate sufficient in order to estimate the yearly income for the town. So I'm going to put that motion for consideration. Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion.
Oh, I'll just come right out and say I don't like it. I don't like having to vote on something that we're already being directed how to vote.
I don't think anybody will disagree with that.
But I mean, if I'm looking at the executive order in front of me, I guess I don't know. I mean, I know we're Old English here, but to refer to him as by His Excellency Ned Lamont, it sounds very king-like. And what we're doing, what we're contemplating doing, or we're having a gun to our head to tell us to do, again, in the town of Durham, under section 3.1.1, the legislative powers of the town falls to the town meeting. We're being told that it's not necessary, but that's a heck of a matter of opinion. The section 3.3 annual budget, the adoption of the annual budget shall be by majority vote of those qualified to vote at the annual budget meeting. The meeting shall have the power to decrease or delete any appropriation or item in an appropriation, but may not increase or add to any appropriation or item of an appropriation, or make any appropriation for a purpose not recommended by the Board of Finance. We're going to give up that right. We're not going to be able to touch the budget at all, let alone vote on it. We're not going to be able to amend it. Section 5.1.7 states that the budget shall become official when adopted by the annual budget meeting, and it's done by a majority of more of the qualified voters present and voting at such a meeting. The contradiction between 7HH and 700 just jumps out at me. One was done May 1st, one was done May 14th. On May 1st, whereas the close contact with people in large numbers increase the risk of transmission of COVID-19, whereas the circumstances of in-person meeting or votes by members of the common interest communities may pass the same risk of transmission of COVID-19. So we're suspending the requirement to vote on such budgets by residents, not limited to any vote at the annual town meeting. But then 2 weeks later, whereas the election of local officials, the right to vote to choose the representatives in safe and predictable manner and is fundamental to our democratic form of government. So if we're voting for people, it's important. If we're voting for budgets, I guess it's less important. So the new 700 is putting out a nominating process to be held by June 9th. The election shall be conducted between June 27 and June 30. And the officials responsible for administering the town folk, the town meetings, selection, the registrar of voters, all the people, and the public health director, exactly what Karen and Lou were talking about, falls to the town of Durham. So normally in our annual budget meeting, we pass budgets, we elect members of DIMIAB, we elect members of RSD 13. We're now cutting this through 2 executive orders, one of which it's too dangerous to vote, the other one it's less dangerous to vote, but you know, it's up to the town to figure out a way to do it safely, which I am all happy with the thought that we can extend voting, we can do something, we can be creative. I've been pushing that issue from day one. We turn around and say now that one is more important than the other. So voting for a budget is risky, but at the same meeting, you also vote for people. So go ahead and have a meeting to nominate them and then suspend that to the next day or continue it to the next day to actually vote in some kind of a drive-up fashion, which hopefully passes muster. I mean, we're again, I'm coming from a manufacturing business that is an essential industry. I've got 60 employees I have to take care of every single day. And, you know, maybe knock on wood, but with a lot of good planning, not a single person has been sick. And, you know, we have to take precautions and we do what we do. I'm living in a household here right now, and I brought my two 95-year-old parents in. I'm not going to put them at risk, especially with the conditions that they are presently in. I know there's a risk. I understand that. I also understand that we're starting to open a state little by little. The democratic process to me, and I guess it comes back to something that I learned in school, very early in school, maybe third grade. If the legislative body of the town of Durham is the town meeting, and we're asking the taxing authority to approve a budget, they already set the mill rate, but approve a budget, and you take the legislators out or the people of Durham out of the equation. I mean, there was a Revolutionary War whose motto was no taxation without representation. I don't see how the voters can get stymied, and we don't allow people the choice. And an executive order being what it is, they've never actually been challenged in court before. So, I mean, we've been pushing executive orders since 1836. Neither their issuing authority nor the permissible scope of these orders have been judicially determined in Connecticut. However, the state Supreme Court has held that the power to legislate is vested solely in the legislation or legislature. Again, that's on a state basis, so the governor can't change law. He can't be the legislative authority. It works on a town basis. Why doesn't it work on a local basis when we are under home rule and we are a chartered town? It just kills me, the inconsistency. And I don't know, I'm just really, really down, not in favor of doing something that I'm being told I must do. If you're asking for a vote, you're not asking for a vote if you're telling me how I have to vote in a democratic nation. You must vote yes, but you must vote. Don't like it, don't want to vote yes. And I won't.
So now you know how those of us who serve on the boards of directors of CCM and COST feel, because we have felt for some time that while they listen to us on some things, they seem to not want to appreciate the emotions and the technicalities and the little idiosyncrasies and the difficulties of applying these things from town to town to town. And quite honestly, I think they made the decision on the budget process early on in this process because they understand how important it would be to the continuity of government if this continued on. And some towns took that direction very early, approved their budgets early, are all set to, you know, they're probably preparing their bills as we speak. We're the ones who chose, and others did too, to delay it as long as possible, hoping, you know, beyond hope here, that we wouldn't have to get to this juncture. But because I don't think any of us feels comfortable doing this. But there are implications to not approving this. And specifically when it comes to the two tax relief programs that we were also mandated to, we were mandated to approve one, we approved both. And either intended or unintended consequence is that if we don't have an approved budget and bills don't go out by July 1, those two programs are in jeopardy of being applicable.
So since we're going to vote, and we're going to obviously vote by ballot because there's going to be nominated candidates for DIMIAB and the Board of Ed, we can't put a question on that same ballot to say yes or no to the budget.
Correct. We cannot, because that executive order allowing for that election says specifically that no other business shall be conducted during that town meeting.
But it wouldn't be during the town meeting, it would be during the drive-up election, so it would be under item C.
No, it would, it's an adjourned meeting. It's still the meeting.
Okay. John, your thoughts?
George, nothing you say I disagree with. You know, you stated eloquently. I don't disagree. That being said, you know, what are the alternatives? I don't like being forced into it too, but at the same time, I want to, and I don't think you're saying anything against what the Board of Finance did. I certainly disagree with, I don't agree with every line item, which probably no one does, but they did as transparent a job as they could in this environment. If you have it like an alternative solution, I'd listen to it. But at the same time, government has to continue. I think the Board of Finance, again, I don't agree with everything. I've had my differences with, you know, expenditures, but overall, did they do a transparent, you know, positive job to continue our government in this sort of, you know, environment that none of us really know the direct road 100% to go down? They did. They did. All six of them did. So I'll listen to any, you know, alternatives, but I just don't want to, you know, I agree with you, but I just don't know what an alternative is where we can have this continuity of government. I understand we could take those executive orders and we can look at them differently. We've got different, looks like we have different legal, I think you brought this up, we've got different town attorneys in different parts of the state saying different things about what the executive orders mean. I think you brought that up at a former meeting, and you're right. So I know we can say what we want from the executive orders, and I don't think anybody believes in home rule more than I do. But if you have a solution, I'll listen. But I mean, I just don't know what else there is, and I do think the Board of Finance did the best job possible. And Laura brings up a good point. I mean, there's that other portion of this that could have a real impact on the townspeople as far as the relief programs. Martin, you're on. I'm sure you've been working on those. And, you know, I don't know how much interest you've gotten from those, or people have
We
reached
already
out.
have applications, John.
So it's an important thing, is my point. And I wouldn't want that to get, you know, Martin, if you want to talk about it, but if we have applications, obviously there's some people, and that's important that we have that. So George, again, I agree with you. I'll listen to an alternative, but it just seems like we may have to go this way.
Well, the alternative to me is as simple as, I mean, right now, from what I understand, the governor has 49 people on a task force that are considering reopening and also helping to draft some of these executive orders. But unfortunately, they're doing it through a not-for-profit, so nothing that they're deciding or discussing is FOIable. I would say, from what Laura said at the last meeting, that there's only 16 towns in the state who actually vote some of these offices by town meeting. So we're very low on a totem pole that we're not getting to see behind the scenes what these guys are discussing. But I don't know that they are even aware that their overlap was so close, what they laid out 2 weeks later, and we're taking two different approaches to something that we normally do through the same town meeting. So if we call a timeout and say, would you reconsider for these 16 towns a more, instead of saying nothing else can be done, he updated the executive order once already because it was confusing. So he came back and said, well, this is what I meant to say. So you had HH. And
Well,
now-
I'll give you a little taste of how this sausage has been made. I went to bed one night last week, I think it was Thursday, thinking that an executive order was coming out that was going to say that all town officers would remain in office until the middle of July, until such time there will be a town meeting. And upon awakening on Friday, and by the end of the day, we got executive order 0000 that says, no, there's going to be an election between the dates of June 27 and June 30, a complete turnaround. And I knew as soon as I saw that we would have this exact problem with, whoa, how come we can do this, but we can't put a question about the budget? The reality of that, it could have worked if they changed the dates, but it couldn't have worked for June, the dates that they did put down, because it would have been too late for us to get the bills out.
Well, I think we could do it, Laura, because I think you can word craft or get any legal opinion to say whatever you want it to say. That being said, I don't know if that's the right way to go. So I agree. I believe in home rule. I think we could do that. I just don't know if is that a battle we take on when the Board of Finance did do a good job, or a transparent job. And then what would the ramifications be if we didn't? If, we interpret it differently, or, we don't offer that program. So
There's a lot of risk there if we don't.
yeah, I agree with you. So
All right, so I guess we got to hold our noses on this one. And I'm going to call for the vote if there's no further discussion. Aye.
I'll vote aye.
George, watch.
Not I.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I know that was very difficult. The next item, to set the date, time, place, and approve the call to a special town meeting and adjourned election for June 29th, which will be a remote meeting starting at 8 p.m. And the adjourned election will be the following day at Corn School to vote on the nominees by ballot. Karen and Lou, you're still on the line?
We're here.
Yes.
Can you give us before I ask for a motion on this, can you give us an explanation of the process that you put together and had reviewed by the health department?
What we basically did was we moved the election outside. We're having everybody try to stay in their cars. They're going to come in picket lane. They're going to pull up, show their ID through the window to the checker who's going to mark them off the registry. Then they're going to go to the ballot clerk, drive to the ballot clerk, get their ballot handed to them, drive to the next stopping spot and mark their ballot, then drive to the end and put the ballot into a ballot box and then drive away. There will be a stand-up place for people who are stand-up walkers or who need to come and vote in person. But the goal is to have everybody as limited contact as possible. A traditional election is not in a town meeting. It's usually held from 6 in the morning until 8 at night. We have rarely had Board of Ed elections with more than 200 people. So we were assuming 200 people would descend upon us at once. We tried to give a break between people between 5 and 8. So maybe people who got off work or would have some flexibility there. that's pretty much it.
You've ordered personal protective equipment.
We have not done anything until we've gotten approval.
Okay.
It's on order with Kevin Donovan, however. He can get his PPE
Right.
if we need, and he can get it from the state or we can buy it. Just to add to what Karen said, we're trying to, without abrogating executive orders, hold a valid and fair election for the board seats available in coherence with the town charter, where everybody votes in person at the town meeting. So we're continuing that procedure and trying not to deviate any more than necessary from what normally transpires in the absence of a pandemic, where people vote at the meeting after nominations. So we are extending the meeting to take the nominations and then voting the next day, where we check in people to make sure they're all town residents. That is a procedure that was instituted about 4 or 5 years ago by Karen and Pam to make sure there was no out-of-town voters influence our Board of Education positions. And so we're adhering closely as possible to state statutes for elections and for the town charter and how we conduct it during the meeting. So this is going to be a longer meeting. I heard some people complain that 5 to 8 is not acceptable. It's 6 times more voting time than we've had in the past. We're amenable to modifying it. As Richard mentioned, if there are people in line to vote at 8 o'clock, they're certainly welcome to vote. And the registrars will supervise. There'll be a moderator, and we'll count the ballots and probably have a result that same night.
Lou and Karen, I don't know if you were on the line during public comment, but it was mentioned that, elderly people, this might be difficult. Would you be amenable to starting it maybe before 5 o'clock?
I don't have a problem. Karen? Karen, on mute.
Okay, we could do that, right, Lou? It's a question of how much you all want to spend on the election. The reality is, I keep going back to the nature of a town meeting. The idea was it was pure democracy. Everybody showed up and they had a right to say anything, and they could nominate themselves, and they could nominate from the floor, and they had complete control. And the flip side has always been, seniors coming out after 8, people with young kids. There's always the flip side of the pure democracy. And we try to keep that balance in this situation. And we're doing our best to. And if we're finding out that 5's too late, we'll go up to 4. But I don't want to go past 8 because it's too dark.
Right, and that's why I'm thinking maybe if we front load it another hour or so, it might be easier. And then I did iterate that, anybody who is in line can still vote, even if it's after 8 o'clock.
Absolutely, yes.
Instead of extending it, I'm wondering, since you get the nominees the day before, I know it would be tough to pull this one off, but can we do an abbreviated absentee type ballot where somewhere available at the town hall or outside or somewhere? If it's
George, there's nothing in the charter that allows absentee
okay.
voting.
Actually, I think Title IX.
And there's nothing, Title IX, but there's
it's a Title VII.
absentees for illness. Absentees for illness, right, Laura? Not for.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
100% mail-in voting. So.
Right.
We were trying to figure out how to do this over Zoom, or if there is a secure way we could. In general, voting over telephone and internet is not a very secure method, but we were trying to figure out a way to do it, and we can't figure out a way to both make sure that everybody is a registered voter in Durham, and that they can and that they can vote securely and privately, and that we can be accurate in counting them. So we're pretty much having to go to a paper ballot.
you'll be able to check off somebody so they're eligible. You hand them the ballot. They move on to, down the line, and then they'll hand the ballot in to someone else.
Yes.
In
It'll be a ballot box.
ballot
put it-
box. Okay.
So if you can do something through Zoom, just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
And if someone can log in throughout the day and there's a registrar or assistant registrar available, if someone knew that they could hold their license up to the monitor, would you accept the vote?
Karen, you could address that. We were worried about privacy.
The privacy of the vote, it's a situation you're supposed to vote privately. Not everybody should know how you vote. And even if Lou and I were as administrators, so it's just the moderator and the two of us seeing each individual vote, like they'd write a scrap of paper and hold it up and would look at it or something like that. It's, I don't think that our technology is sophisticated, and it would be great in theory, but I think it'd crash big time. But also I think there's just too many other, we could do it, but everybody votes at once. And I just don't see the public being patient for 200 people doing this over the internet.
Yeah,
No,
it'd be
I was thinking before the election, but again, I guess if you're at the town meeting and you're doing a show of hands, we don't always do a paper ballot. We don't always have a lot of nominees.
I think it'd be too dangerous, and it's not tested, and it could open up to a lawsuit. Who knows?
All right. I just want to.
The issue with the paper ballot is a situation where if anybody asks, they have the right to switch it and make it private. So we have to assume that question would be asked.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
Sometimes you try to please everybody, and you always have that little issue.
Yeah, it's that law. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, is just to stay within that term of the law.
So once we approve this motion, I would say we got to get some public information out ASAP. And
Yes.
I would not be opposed even to maybe sending out the postcard that we have been using to put out information, to explain this process, to explain that, the meeting on Monday will be to accept nominations, that candidates will be allowed to speak, and questions and comments can be taken from the public at that time. So I think that will or at least show people that we are trying to, as the executive order has stated, to mimic the process as closely as we can.
I agree. And I think obviously it wants to come from the two of you, and laying out, all aspects of it from the first nominating meeting to the actual vote itself, the time and the place.
Yeah, we can start making those, you could start making those plans tomorrow, Karen and Lou. And I think Martin's on the phone. He can attest that it's a pretty easy process to get the content over to CCM. And they will get it in the mail pretty quickly, right, Martin? Yeah.
Lou,
Right.
Karen, my only one question is there any way for someone to get nominated without doing it through the Zoom meeting? People can still vote. They can still come and vote. Do we have any mechanism where someone who maybe doesn't utilize the internet or?
Yeah, I was going to ask if you were going to, I'm not positive it's legal, but I think you could probably accept submissions addressed to the moderator through email or fax, or it's something for y'all to discuss, because it's pretty clear in the charter, or it's my understanding, that the town meeting, the nominations come during the town meeting. but it's, again, it's at the town meeting. And I think that going to a third way, you know, faxing it or emailing it or sending it by person, a very primitive method would be just notifying the first select woman and then have her read off the names that she was sent as a nomination, where she acts as the nominator.
I just texted our town attorney. Can we take a nomination through the mail or email?
Yeah.
I would like that just because I don't think everybody might utilize.
Yeah, and that step spelled out on the postcard, information postcard, could be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as long as you make the process clear to everybody who wants to participate, you could do it that way.
Oh, there's our town attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
okay,
was
good.
I'll just say,
self-muting.
Karen and Lou, you know, Karen especially, we've had our certainly differences when it comes to the election, this sort of election other times, but I think you guys have done the best you can do in a bad environment. I mean, no one likes, I think you guys would admit this isn't an ideal situation of doing it, but you've put together something that is as, you know, as good as we can get it. And I commend you both and thank you both for putting this forward.
I agree. Very good job, you guys.
All right, so I will make a motion to,
I have a quick question. This is Anita.
wait, Anita, I'm sorry. Public comment, the next public comment section will come after item number 13.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
you're welcome. So I will make a motion to accept the motion as presented in the agenda.
Second.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 The time was changed though, right, Laura?
Yes, we're going to start at 4 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.
All right, make a motion to accept the tax refunds as presented by our tax collector.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All the new business. All right, let me get my.
You jumped over the approval of meeting minutes.
Oh, minutes, sorry. I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of April 27.
Second.
Any additions, deletions, corrections?
I think there were a couple in the public comments that I didn't see in the minutes. I think Mike Jeremiah, Bill Laflamme, and Elizabeth Shoddy all spoke. I did not see in the minutes that I looked at their names, but I gave it a quick look.
I see Mike, I see Bill,
You do, then I'm looking at the wrong ones, then I'm
I
sorry.
see Elizabeth. They're all in there.
Yeah, I
Okay.
got it.
Then disregard, I was looking at other minutes because those I didn't see their names, so, okay.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I'd like to make a motion to accept meeting minutes of May 11th.
Second.
Any additions, deletions, corrections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now we can get to old and new business. The EDC, Economic Development Survey, closed last week with over 500 responses. So congratulations to our citizenry to be very attentive to that. The results are being compiled and there will be a presentation at a June 4th meeting at 7 o'clock. And we will advertise that as soon as we can. I'm sorry, I had to get to another screen to let someone in. By the way, at one point we had 51 attendees at this meeting. As I mentioned earlier, the application for the Drinking Water Grant and Revolving Loan Fund was successfully submitted on time. So I want to thank you for help with that. At 2 meetings ago, we had a presentation from the Infrastructure Committee, and one of the members, Deb DeFelice, wanted to me to give an update on that. She did reach out to Eversource to understand why Main Street residents may have reasonable costs for the gas line connection. She assumed that there was already a reducing station in the area. I think you might recall that we talked about that. But he said that Eversource had decided to install regulators for Main Street residents at the station. This means that residents' cost for the connection is based on their estimated gas usage, calculated over 25 years, as well as the distance from the road and any obstructions. So basically, it's a case-by-case basis in terms of what it's going to cost for each connection. What he also said is that in this case, there could be a slight reduction because the water project and the gas project itself is paying for the road construction. So homeowner wouldn't have to bear the cost of that. So we did talk that night about setting up a couple of Zoom meetings so that property owners can talk directly with Eversource representatives. We did hold one during the day for all businesses along the line, and we did one later in the afternoon the next day with all residents. Each meeting, there was about 15 participants, and I was on it, and at least 4 other, so about 10 people, interested people, were on each line, which was pretty good. So we did do that. As you know, the 2020 Durham Fair has officially been canceled. That was a sad day, but I commend the directors and the executive board for their thoughtful consideration. And there was a lot to consider. And one of the things we have to remember as a community, that many of our local civic and nonprofits raise their entire budgets, operating budgets at the fair. So if you're a member of one of those community organizations or regular supporters of those organizations, I would, maybe reach out and stay tuned to see if any of them will be looking for alternative methods for raising some funds this year, because we surely depend on their generosity all year in giving out those funds. I talked about the hair salons being pushed back to June 1st. And hazardous waste and paper shredding events are set to resume. We'll be posting that that brochure on the website, and we will attach them to these minutes. It's important. We did get some, properties are still selling and people are moving, and it was difficult to work with some of these homeowners with their hazardous waste. So we're glad that that's about to resume. Lastly, well, first I'll talk about the meetings that I've attended, CCM board meeting, the Durham Middlefield Division Middlesex Chamber of Commerce meeting, the Governor's weekly conference call, the Demis Region 2 weekly conference call, Police Officer Standards and Training Council meeting, and the RiverCog special meeting. And then lastly, I'll talk about the transfer of properties. So the first step per the bid process was we did return the checks that were sent in by the bidders who were unsuccessful. The next step is to send a letter to the bidders who were awarded the properties and ask for the remaining balance of the purchase price. And then we would prepare the deeds, which we've already started to do, title search, and then actual, closing, which represents the transfer of the properties. George asked for some time to seek some additional guidance from the town attorney, which he did, and he did ask and he did receive. And basically, the response was that the attorney couldn't find anything along the process that was done incorrectly through the ordinance or per the ordinance. And so it's my recommendation that we move the process along. And I think if we have found some shortcomings in this process, that we start to correct that for the next time that we do it. George?
Well, there was one shortcoming that he did find, but the question is how far do we push it? And when it came to the ordinance, the requirement was to give a detailed description of the properties being sold in the legal notice. The legal notice was in the Middletown Press for one day, and it stated simply various parcels of real estate. And to me, my issue was that's really not a detailed description. So if you're one of the few folks who happens to get the Middletown Press in the town of Durham and you read that, you'd have to take another step to try to figure out what parcels were available, if they or something people might be interested in. So it didn't come out and state that in detail what parcels. And the concern there also was that that was in the middle of the town hall shutdown. So we shut down a couple of weeks after, or I think 13 days after the bids went out. So, I mean, there is an issue, there is a question, and.
Well, so it is common practice to, and towns actually fought for this years and years ago, to allow for directives to go to a website for further clarification so as to limit the cost of paying line by line by line in a legal notice. You might recall your days of Board of Finance when we had requirements to say, publish an entire ordinance, and it could be lines and lines and lines, and we'd have to pay for all of that. So now the statutes allow us for truncated legal notices and direction to see, and the bids themselves did have the details of the properties. So I would say that you could be right that we should have listed the roads where the properties, we could have done that, but we didn't. And as a matter of practice, I know there's been a lot of discomfort over this, and I think doing something for the first time lends itself to that. But I would be happy to slow down the process on anything to get it right. And George, I really do appreciate the way you look at things with a critical eye, with an eye towards details. But I wish perhaps some of this scrutiny could have happened beforehand. And I don't want you to take that as a criticism, as just a matter of how this board should be doing things, and happy to slow things down in order for us all to get that comfort level. But with this benefit of having a look back on things, I think we did the best that we could have. And I don't think that any question about these properties that were received by any staff members were left unanswered. I don't think anyone tried to get information and they couldn't, to my knowledge anyway.
Well, again, it comes down to an ordinance that was approved a year ago or a year and a half ago. But I guess my question would be, even now, if you're going to write an ordinance that says detail and then you choose not to because policy is a truncated version on a website, then why don't you just come out and say that when you wrote the ordinance, which specifically states that the publication will have a detailed description of the properties in question. And some of this, again, the Board of Selectmen is not writing the legal notice, and I don't get the Middletown Press. But if I did go to the legal notice page on the town's website, I wouldn't have found it either, because I had to know to go to bids and opportunities, which is normally a vendor's page. So the fact that I'm under the assumption that we're doing everything by the letter of the law, yeah, I guess hindsight is 20/20, but to look at it and not to be involved in writing the notice or reviewing how the notice is posted, I really can't, I don't think that I could say that I did something wrong by looking at it after the fact, because a lot of people question, and it first came back with Jim Finley's question, who was a property abutter, who said, I don't think the legal notice process was good, and he wrote to all of us. So I start looking into it at that point. But it is a question, again, that some of this is done, you know, it's staffed out, things are done. I understand that, you know, there is a process in place, but if I were to look back at it, I mean, I definitely think that ordinance wants to be updated going forward. I do think that there's holes in it. I think there's things that should be improved with the wording. And as Karen Cheney was saying, with, you know, the emergency order that they were talking about within the registrars, if you're going to write something, you kind of want to follow it and follow it to the letter of the way you wrote it, because that's how it was approved at town meeting. So if we're going to do a shortcut, maybe we should just tell the citizens of Durham when they're approving an ordinance at town meeting that we're writing something, but we're not necessarily going to do it according to the way we wrote it. I think that actually is kind of silly.
Well, again, I want to say I appreciate your critical eye, and I think I've tried to take all of your suggestions and, you know, implement them and consider them. So, you know, I hope that continues.
Well, again, you do what you need to do from that perspective. I do think there were issues within the process. I've verbalized the issues that I felt were present. There is a process in place, and I followed through on that process. So now it's in another arena.
Yeah. I don't see the need to be going through a sale anytime soon. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep this on a front burner if you think that ordinance needs to be amended. And I think that you're right about that. Now that we've gone through this, let's stay on top of that. I don't mean that we need to rush it through. Maybe we can just get it prepared and teed up so that when we start having our town meetings again, we can add it to an agenda.
That would be fine. I already have what I would recommend, so I can provide you guys with a draft.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any other old and new business or selectmen comments?
I don't have any.
All right, then I will open it back up to the public comments. Anita, you still on the line?
Yes, I am. I have a couple of questions. I just wanted to verify with the voting for the at Corn School, if that the PPE equipment will be N95 masks.
What we're doing, we're expecting the voters to provide their own. We're not providing voting PPEs. We're providing them for our workers, to keep our workers.
That's what I'm talking about, workers. Well, and I guess it doesn't matter if the voters have a 95. Would it matter if the workers have a N95 also?
We're still in discussion about that right now. We don't know for sure. We're trying to keep them as safe and secure as possible, but I can't tell you right now exactly what kind of masks they'll be wearing. We would encourage all the voters.
Right now, the N95 masks that we have are being saved for our first responders.
Yes.
So I don't know if those particular masks will be available, but we will have something that is approved or guided by our health department.
Okay, thank you. And the other question is, because I've been in a couple of conversations with the property that you're talking about up for bid. Has there been decisions on who's been approved to purchase those properties, if there's any yet? And if they are they friends and family of people that doesn't include everyone else? I don't know.
Well,
okay.
There's been votes on who got awarded the bids. And at this point in time, that still stands.
And are they relatives of people, or I'm just trying to think, was it friends and family who got received, or just anybody who read the new Middletown Press?
Well, just to be clear, the legal notice was put in the Middletown Press, which is our paper of record. And then immediate abutters to all the properties were sent letters. And then obviously, public discussion in our meetings, et cetera, et cetera. But that's what the process was. And I think that's one of the processes that George might be recommended that we expand if we do this another time.
Yeah, I like the idea to have the address in the public notice. Yeah. And a little bit more detail. I don't know what it would cost, $5 more. I don't know, really.
Yeah. Thank you, Anita. Any other public comment? I see a Mariah.
Hi, how are you? My name's Mariah Roy. I came onto this meeting because I thought there was going to be a discussion about the drive-up voting. It didn't really seem too much of a discussion at all, kind of just this is what we're doing. And I have some concerns after the vague comments about the PPE and what's going to be happening. I'm an emergency room registered nurse. I know the definition of emergency. I see life versus death decisions made every day. My question is, what was so emergent about this drive-up voting that we had to rush and take the risk right away when there was a decision previously already made for the 3 sitting on the Board of Ed to be extended to November of 2021? It just is kind of frustrating from a healthcare personal perspective that we're negating all the efforts being made by first responders and healthcare workers like myself when we still don't have proper answers on the PPE. The last response was really kind of vague. Unless we have someone like the National Guard coming in and running these operations, then we're taking a very unnecessary risk, exposing a lot of people in our community. If we're expecting all these people to bring their own PPE for the drive-up testing, what about the older people or people who haven't been able to leave their houses, who haven't been able to get their hands on this PPE? Are the people running the testing sites going to be changing gloves in between every person they interact with? Are we going to be giving pens, one individual pen to every person coming to vote at the ballot? What are you using to clean all the stuff in between? Is it something that actually kills coronavirus? You know that you have to wait 2 to 3 minutes, depending on what you're using, after you spray something with the cleaning product before it actually sanitizes, and then wipe it off. Are there temperature checks that are going to be being done for the people that are working these stations? Do we know that they're safe and okay to interact with? In addition, my son is in special education. I work 12-hour shifts. I happen to be working 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. that day. Does my vote count less because I'm a healthcare worker? I can't get there from the hours of 5 to 8 p.m. It's impossible. It just won't happen for me. It feels like there's zero inclusion or consideration for those fighting on the front lines. Meanwhile, it was quoted that they made these hours for flexibility of people getting out of work. Well, which people? The people, not the people working on the front lines fighting COVID daily. It seems as though maybe with the superintendent exiting that there's some kind of hidden agenda for these Board of Ed elections to be occurring rather than the extension for November to 21. So that's all I wanted to say. And I just wish we had taken into consideration the whole community, especially people out there working every day that have no choice but to go see these devastating cases in person.
Laura, do you want me to address the health issues or do you want to address why we're having the elections first?
So a decision was never made until the Board of, how the transition was going to happen until the Board of Selectmen researched the options. And then we voted on this option. And of course, it was before the COVID emergency and we thought it was a rather democratic way to do it, actually. And, you know, at town meetings, there's always someone who's disenfranchised, which is why we asked for the plan amendment so that we can transition to the ballot. But, you know, we still have several steps in order to get there. Karen, yeah, why don't you address the health considerations that we're working with our health department to implement?
We're basically in a situation where we as election workers are told we have to have this election. And our question is, what is the safest way to do it? So again, I'm working with a background of family members with infectious diseases background. And we're going to protect, but my goal is to protect my poll workers and the voters both. That's one of the reasons why we are holding this outside, even though we're hoping it'll aerosolize less. And we aren't, you know, most of us would rather be inside than outside in the potential rain or whatever, but we're holding it outside to help provide the distancing. The cleaning, where I did not spend tons of the taxpayers' money trying to figure this out because I needed an approval to go forward, but we've been talking to suppliers and we have the supplies and we're understanding. I personally have a special education son and my husband is at risk, high risk for coronavirus, so I don't want to bring it home to him. And we're aware that this problem exists, but the question is, how do you hold an election? And this is our best attempt. We are not denying you.
Karen,
Yeah.
in the informational postcard that you plan to mail out with
Right.
instructions, perhaps we can put something in there that says if you don't have access to a mask, that we might be able to provide one. It won't be an N95, but it
No.
might be one of the ones that people have been, you know, seen with in public.
If necessary, we could have a station before the check-in line that would provide PPE and masks for those people that want them. However, basically they're going to be driving in their own privacy booth in a car to the check-in line and to ballot people. And they merely need to roll down their window a half inch to receive a ballot from the ballot clerk. And when they're checking in, they can merely hold their driver's license up to the window to show that they are a resident. So we are doing as much distancing as possible, and which still enables us to run an election.
Even if we're putting even the slightest amount of risk, why is it necessary? Why is putting anyone at risk
That's a question for Laura.
necessary?
That's a combination of a question. The Board of Selectmen made the decision, and it's based on the options open to them under the executive order and the town attorney opinion. And it has been discussed in previous Board of Selectmen meetings, but I'm welcome to have Laura break it down again if she wants to.
Which is very technical. I want a more humane answer as to why we're putting our residents at risk.
Well, we're talking two different things, Karen. The transition plan is a whole nother topic.
I know.
The reason why there's an election is because we had 3 expiring terms. And Mariah, I thought that the governor's executive order, I don't know if you were on the phone when I spoke about this, but I literally went to bed last Thursday night expecting an executive order to be issued on Friday that said that all officers currently in office with terms expiring June 30 would remain in office until such time that a in-person town meeting could happen. And they were putting a July date on that.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, instead, what we received was this town meeting election process that will happen between the dates of June 27 and June 30. So literally in the last 4 days, well, the registrars had some thoughts about this, but they literally in the last 4 days had to come up with this plan because it was something entirely different than what we expected would happen.
Following up on that plan, because I'm just confused about the plan in itself, I don't think it will take taxpayer money to answer these questions, but will the workers be changing gloves in between every person they interact with? And that, like, I just want to make sure that the proper precautions are going to be taken if this is something that is obviously going to be going into effect, because all it takes is one person to infect numerous people. There are asymptomatic carriers. Are we screening people for symptoms before they come? Do people have to wear a mask before they pull up? What about the people that don't want to wear a mask, don't have access to a mask, or just refuse to wear one?
We have had this discussion with the Secretary of State. Can we deny people their constitutional right to vote because they refuse to wear a mask? This has been an issue that it hasn't been resolved yet. We can offer masks. They're still open whether or not we can require them. We are hoping that the only times there are interactions is when the window is open enough to take the ballot, and again when the ballot is cast into the ballot box. Those should be the only 2 times the window is open so that there's actual contact between the workers. The people handling the gloves will be the people actually dealing with the ballots themselves. They will be the ballot clerk and the tabulator tender, and then the people who do the actual counting of the votes.
Well, Karen, if you're putting it through the ballot box, can't we get a printout?
This is going to be hand counted because we're printing we just get the names the day before, so we can't send it off to Adkins to a printer to get it printed. So we're hand counting it. So it won't actually be fed through the tabulator. You know.
Well,
can I make a suggestion?
Karen, we might be able to solve for that because Kim does know how to print those ballots. So even if we go to a late meeting, even if we go to 11 o'clock, won't there be time to print ballots the next day?
We own the memory cards and the yes/no memory cards for a budget referendum. We can't have a memory card for an election. We need to program it, and we won't names of the people until the day before.
Got it. Yeah, I forgot that part. I'm sorry, Christine.
I was just going to make a suggestion that, I think you have 2 meetings before the election, and that perhaps you should have an agenda item that would review a proper health and safety plan for this election to address a lot of the valid points that people are bringing up in terms of, are you hand sanitizing pens? Are you changing gloves? What's going to be the protocol? I would really highly recommend that. I mean, as an executive of a very large healthcare facility, these are all the things that I think a lot of people are putting into place for their businesses. And so I think it would behoove the town to do something like that.
Well,
We
we'll
have-
confer with our health director.
Yeah, we have not gone into excruciating detail for everything. Like, we're planning on giving out golf pencils. We don't want them back. We're handing the ballots in file folders so people are keeping them. We're trying to do that. We've got this worked out, and it's going through the health director. And so we aren't just blithely doing this on our own. And it's not necessarily something the Board of Selectmen should be making these decisions. As the health director and us to make sure that it's being done right.
And
So
Christine, we're also abiding by CDC election guidelines.
Yeah.
And we'll be getting more guidelines from the state of Connecticut.
does that help, like, meet some of your concerns?
Not really. I think actually having a concrete plan in writing that you could share with the community in terms of the process, I think that would, hopefully, help a lot of people. But I understand. I should say, I understand that you wouldn't have all your ducks in a row given at this point in time. And then I'm sure much more work will be done regarding that. So I understand that piece.
I agree, though, Christine, that we should communicate the plan. I think what Karen is saying, that it's not a plan that the Board of Selectmen is going to deliberate. It will be a plan that is vetted through our health department. But I think your suggestion that we communicate it to the public so that they have some confidence and feel secure in coming out to vote.
It's Missy. Sorry, I'm on the phone. Can I just say
Sure.
something really quick? I'm just wondering if it's possible, if we know who is going to be running, if you wanted to, that you could just bring your own paper, write down your 3 names and hand that in rather than having to touch a ballot that was touched by somebody else.
We can discuss that. We've thought about that too, because we can discuss that too. Yeah.
Because I mean, you don't have no idea how many times that piece of paper was touched by someone. And I mean, I'm also in healthcare, and I agree with the other caller. I mean, you're putting people at undue risk for something that, to me, is not emergent.
Mariah, that might work fine as long as there's no nominations at the meeting or
Would it be possible for you?
so we
guys
talked
to-
about that, possibly doing that.
Could you put it on the website and have people print off a ballot and bring it with them along with their own pen?
Possible, good idea, George.
Yeah. The voting has to be done in front of the moderator. They can't have a pre-marked ballot and come in and drop it in. So we have to, let's sit down. We'll work on that. All these are great ideas. Yeah.
So if you have to watch us do it, how close do you have to be to us to watch us do it?
This is a question where you have the workers are on the sidewalk. We're within 6 feet. Right now, when you go into an election building, and it's from greater than 6 feet, but we're still, yeah.
Mariah, what I think Karen is alluding to is there has to be a verification of the voter.
Sure. And I'm just going to ask for a third time just to see if it gets answered. Are they going to change the gloves in between every interaction they have with people? And is anyone aware of how long coronavirus lives on paper?
I can't remember paper, and also I don't know papers of different.
That's what we're talking about right now. So I feel like it's very important to have those things and know those things before we're making this decision. It's minutes to 5 days. And we need to know if people are going to be changing gloves between every interaction, because maybe people coming to vote won't be wearing gloves, but they'll be touching the paper and then they'll be handing it back to someone who's wearing gloves. Even if they're wearing gloves, it's getting on their gloves. So now the coronavirus is on their gloves. They pick up a new fresh ballot, they pass it to the next voter, and they're passing coronavirus to a voter who came innocently to come and vote to represent their community and the people they want to put into the Board of Education office seat.
Can you call me separately, and you and I and Lou can go over the plans we have, and you can show us, discuss with us what we can do?
Isn't that the point of being here?
I think that's not really fair to everyone else who's on this call. I'd be more than happy to speak to you, but I think it's fair to address the plan and talk it out with everybody that's on this call and took time out of their evening tonight to be here to discuss it.
Okay.
I would like to ask a follow-up question. What happens in terms of liability if someone were to get coronavirus as a result of exposure during this voting process?
This has been a question we have brought up. It's one of the questions in my notes about this whole thing is there's a lot of different liability issues. And one of them, part of it is that how does anybody know how anybody got coronavirus? Because we just don't know. It's in the community. That's why they changed the workers' comp laws and stuff, is we don't know unless they manage to do tracking, and we know, but that's pretty rare. And the other question I had is, what if there's like an accident or something? This is an issue. It's not.
I actually disagree. We actually know how it's transmitted in many different ways.
Well, also, you can do the way that they actually diagnose it is they look at the genetic sequence of the virus. Right. And the virus does change, and you can actually track back infection paths. And I'm not trying to be difficult. I just think this is an important question as we think this through as a town, recognizing that we're in a tough spot here. But it is a possibility.
Hey, Karen and Lou, you guys talk with our town health director, correct? You have access to our.
Yeah.
Okay. So any questions? You're fine talking with them, correct?
Yeah, he approved our longer laid out policy. He made some changes, and we changed the policy based on his recommendations, and based on what you're just talking about, we'll talk to him again and say these were brought up at the meeting.
Awesome, thank you.
For any other public comment? I see hands raised. I don't know if they were from before or not.
Laura, it's Francis.
Yes.
The Board of Selectmen have the authority to postpone this election as it's not essential.
Well, if we don't have an election, there will be vacancies.
Or they're extended.
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that.
Till the town comes out of a
Does
state.
the Board of Selectmen have the authority to postpone them?
I don't know that answer at this point in time. As I stated before, it was the method that we thought we were going to be getting to address this.
And also the questions that we asked pertain very much to the Board of Education. We also have 4 people coming up on the DIMIA board, and that's all of our representation from the town of Durham. So as of June 30, we lose 100% of our representation to the DIMIA board.
Once again, not essential board. When you really boil it down to what's important in running and stable, those 2 positions can also be extended.
How?
The folks stay on until the crisis is over, or the leadership that's currently in place runs the board until the time it's safe to do so.
So we lose all 4 of our members. Middlefield lose 2 of theirs. So there's only 2 board members left over, and I'm not sure who has the authority to extend terms outside of an election. The governor order gave us the method to run an election. If you go back to the governor now and say, well, we don't want to run it, we'd rather extend, I don't know he's going to issue a new executive order to allow anybody to extend terms beyond a stated due date. I mean, the President of the United States would probably like that too, but I don't think he's going to get away with that either.
And excuse me, but if you look at the executive order, 1B reads, any election and any district or town meeting required by law for the purpose of electing or appointing members or officials to any municipal or regional governmental entity or quasi-municipal corporation, including nomination of candidates, if applicable, shall be conducted between June 27th and June 30th, 2020, and no other business shall be conducted at such an election or district or town meeting. So isn't the order saying that if it's by law, we have to have the election?
That's the way I'm reading it.
That's the way I read it too. I mean, we have more than the Board of Ed. I mean, we can possibly extend one, I'm not sure, but we have no authority to extend the other.
I'm sorry, can I just come back to this question about whether the board or the first selectman has the authority to postpone the election yourselves? I feel like, Laura, your answer on that was that you weren't sure.
I'm not sure about that.
Because if it is a question of protecting the health of the townspeople, I would like to know the answer to that.
So the reason I'm not sure, well, maybe I should say that I'm pretty sure that we don't have that ability, which is why the approximate 16 towns who still elect officers at town meeting have been wondering, what they should do. I mean, there's a town in Goshen had a vacancy on the Board of Ed, and there was no authority to fill that vacancy because there's no statutory authority other than the town meeting. The town meeting is our legislative body. So, previous in the agenda, people were pushing to vote on the budget. Now we're allowing for a vote. So you see the difference of some people who are very reticent to come and do this, and then there's others who are very eager to do it. And I think our registrars, it's incumbent upon them to do it as safely as we can. And I think they're taking that responsibility very seriously. Joe, did you have your hand up again?
Yes, I did. Go ahead.
Yep.
I guess, well, I'll start off with the land issue. And once again, extremely disappointed in our town government that they find that now it's acceptable not to follow town ordinances, and that it seemed like in the last meeting's discussion that our town's code of ethics really don't mean anything in this town. And if you're going to review the process, maybe you ought to take a second look at our code of ethics and how they're applied to actions by people in our town government, because this whole process, people can say, well, it's the first time we did it and there may be some problems. Well, if there's problems, we should be stopping, and we shouldn't be just finding excuses for not following town ordinances, not following our code of ethics. Just extremely disappointing. The other thing I'd like to ask is about the consent order that you spoke about.
Yes.
And mentioned that it's, I guess you've had it for 2 years. During that discussion, you mentioned 5 sites. What are the 5 sites?
So I know you've been to some of our water meetings. There are areas outside of the Superfund that have had contamination, some with MTBE, like the former gas station property, up where Parsons Manufacturing one is, there's some contamination there. There are 3 sites along Main Street corridor that have that kind of contamination. And then there are 2 other areas, the Royal Oak subdivision and the Durham Heights subdivision, where there are some what they call aesthetic issues, water quality issues that are more preferable or non-preferable to people, quality of the drinking water, but nothing contaminated. Those areas were also contemplated in the new water system. And then the last one is the Tuttle Road contamination that was discovered several years ago with an undetermined source. And that was VOCs.
The other thing I'd like to mention is with the discussions of holding an election, are we capturing as a town, are we capturing the cost of this COVID virus and its cost to the town? So that if there is funding available, we might recoup some of the costs?
Yes, we are tracking that. We have submitted already some expenses to CCM, and we've also filed a FEMA application.
And the last thing I'd like to mention is I have a little bit more time these days, and listening to the police and fire scanner and the response by our brave firemen that are going out in the middle of all of this to protect our community, and the notice the other day about the cancellation of the Durham Fair. And I know it may end up being a difficult budget year, but without the fair, some of their funding disappears. Yeah. And for those guys going out there and making and gals making the sacrifices, maybe you guys could consider some method of rewarding them for their service during this time when they're going to be lacking.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago at our Chiefs Council meeting, I did ask the departments with the cancellation that I had anticipated how that would affect their departments, because they do receive some funds and it is a fundraising opportunity for them. So I asked them to evaluate that and get back to me, and we'll work together to see how we can replace those funds.
Well, I hope that the Board of Selectmen and our Board of Finance would support whatever initiative. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Hi, this is Heather Parenti.
Hi, Heather.
I just had a question about the water on Brewster Lane, or Brewster Road, or Tuttle Lane, I'm sorry. Brewster School is on that. So how is that affecting our kids?
So the DEEP did extensive testing when that was initially discovered. So they do know where the boundaries are of that contamination, and it's not anywhere close to Brewster School. Any other public comment? That being said, I would take
Rick?
What, Rick?
Yeah, I would like to thank Joe Pasquale for his comments on the firemen. They've never missed a call since the day they were founded. We could always count on them, even for non-emergencies. It's a great asset to the community. I'd also like to thank the Registrar of Voters for their presentation on this voting issue. And I'm especially grateful to George Ames for maximizing my voting rights. I like to vote. It's the American way. And as far as the individual that has 11 shift and can't make those voting hours, and the board, I guess you've extended the hours from 5 to 8 to now 4 to 8. So now we have 4 hours of voting instead of 3. I think if you went back and looked at the history of electing members to the Board of Education at town meetings in prior times, they never had a guarantee of a window of opportunity to vote. If it was the first item on the agenda, the vote could actually take place within 5 minutes of convening the meeting, or 10 minutes, or an hour and a half later. But we never had a guaranteed window of 4 hours. I have faith in the people working on this procedure that it can be done and done safely, especially considering the circumstances we're under. I had several strikes against me with the Cono-17 virus issue, one in my age and one's a previous condition. And I'm sure that, you know, my rights, my health rights will be protected. I'm very interested in my voting rights because I favored this proposition for a long time. Unfortunately, it had a fall when it did. If we did it several years earlier, we wouldn't have this problem. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm out.
Any other public comment? Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As I said,
Laura, hold on.
we
Hold
had
on, sorry.
51 people join us tonight. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh. How about one
Laura,
of
I
the
think you had
humans?
somebody talking. Laura, you might have had somebody trying to talk.
Anyone?
No.
Okay.
Okay, then I'll second your motion.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, everyone.